Okay, hi everybody. So this recording is made in 2023, just the beginning. I wanted to make sure that you have the latest instructions of where to find Java, how to install it, where to find your terminal, and how to write your first program. Once we go through that beginning, then the rest of the lectures is going to be what I recorded several years ago. Showing you the differences between Python and Java and writing your first Java programs and so on. So first thing first, how do you install Java on your computer? First of all, even how do you even see if you have Java already installed? So first thing you need to figure out is where is a terminal on your computer. For those of you who have Mac, like I do, all you have to do is go to Spotlight and type terminal, just like that, and then you press enter. And once you do that, it looks like this. Let me open another. I made it smaller, it looks like something like this. And there you should type word Java C, okay, and then press enter. If you don't have Java on your computer, you will, like I didn't before I started recording this, you will see something like this. The operation can be found, unable to local Java runtime. So right before recording this, I actually didn't have Java, but then I installed it. And now I have it. If you have Java, something like this, but after installing it, and I type Java C, something like this happened. At least I don't get a mistake. The operation can be compiled. So if you get the operation cannot be completed, that means you don't have Java C, or rather Java, on your computer. Okay, so how do you install it? You go to Google, don't type Java, type Java Development Kit, like I just did when I was looking for it. You're going to take you to this webpage, Java Downloads by Oracle. You click on that, and now you're going to be on a webpage, Java Downloads. And now you have to figure out what you should download. So it has 3 operating systems, Linux, Mac OS. So I have Mac OS and Windows. Okay, so those of you who have Windows, you choose one of these. I guess you'll have to figure out between X641 and X641 MSI. You can Google to figure out which one of those, or probably for most of you it's going to be this one, X64 installer, that you're going to download and install. In Mac, there are also 2 options. I believe this first one, I installed this first one. First of all, I want a DMG, you want DMG installer. And then the question is, do you want ARM64? That depends basically on the processor you have, or you want X64. So I believe those of you who have a newer Mac, that you should install this. This is what worked for me. I believe that's with these M chips, and probably if you have Intel chips, the older ones, then it's probably this installer. Anyway, so in either case, you click here and download starts, and you see here starting, but I already completed this part. So once it's downloaded, just like any other software, you download it and you install it. Okay, so once you install Java and you go back to the terminal, and let me now make it bigger. So, all right, so you go back to the terminal, it looks something like this. Now when you type Java C, you don't get a mistake anymore. You get some instructions of how Java C is used. Okay, so that's it for the part of how you install Java. The second thing you will need to install is an editor. It's a piece of software where basically you're going to be typing your Java programs. And for that, I recommend Sublime Text. Is a free editor. Oh, by the way, for those of you who are in Windows, here's how you find terminal. In Windows, it's called command line. Okay, so if you want to start command line, so it's not called terminal, it's called command line. If you want to start command line in Windows, it looks like these are the instructions. You open start menu or press Windows key plus R. So you open a start menu and type CMD in the, so the same way we in a Mac, we went to Spotlight and type terminal. You will go to your start menu, and when it opens, you're going to press CMD for command line and press enter, and something like a terminal will open in Windows. Okay, so that was the first thing. You find out where's the terminal on your computer. You put in javac to see if Java is already installed. If it's not, you type in Java Development Kit, you get to this web page and install Java based on your operating system and on your computer. Okay, the second thing and last thing that you need as a prep work is to install an editor. I recommend Sublime Text. So it's this one here. You just go to downloads, and in case of Mac OS X, this is what I installed. And in case of Windows, you just follow the appropriate links to install Sublime Text. So you just click on it, it's going to download. I guess I go here to downloads if I want it for Mac OS. There it is, it's already downloading. So if you look at my downloads, JDK is basically what Java is, Java Development Kit. That's what you're going to install first. And then Sublime Text you're going to install second. Okay, so this is Sublime Text is already installed and Java is already installed. Now we're going to go with the rest of the lecture, all the lecture of how you write your first Java code, what are the differences with Python, and so on. It is basically free. I mean, it says that it's not, at some point it's going to pop up with some commercial and ask you if you want to pay, and in that post you just click cancel and you can continue using it. So that's something I'm going to be using it because you will be suggested that editor. It's a very nice editor for Java. You will be suggested to use that editor in ITIL 1121. You can find some other editor that you like. For example, one that I used before that is nice, that I used when I used to teach Java was TextMate. I don't know if it's available in Windows, but they have it in Mac. It's also nice. Okay, so you choose which one. This is a really good one, Sublime Text, so install that. So in addition to installing JDK, install some good editor like Sublime Text. What makes it good is that it knows the syntax of Java, that it appropriately colors the keywords and so on. You will see this as we go. So once you have both of these installed, then we can start to write our first Java program. Okay, so here's how you're going to do that. Okay, so let's write our first Java program and then learn how to run it. As per good old tradition, we're going to first write a program that prints hello world. But before I do that, actually, and before I forget, those of you who have Windows, the way to access a terminal or a console, a command line, whichever word you prefer, I will be probably interchangeably using all of those words. Somewhere in the search in Windows, you can type CMD, and that should actually take you to the command line in Windows. And hopefully when you run javac there, as you will see, we will do in a couple of minutes, you will be able to compile Java programs. All right, so let's write our first program. So once you install, let's say, Sublime Text, I have it already here installed. Let me actually shut it down so we start everything from the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to start it and let's write our first Java program. All right, so Java developers, when they developed the language, they decided that it will be object-oriented programming language, and in the process decided basically that there's no easy or at least clean way to write procedural programs. What I mean by procedural program is what we did, let's say, in the first 2/3 of the ITIL 1120 class, where all you do is write functions and run functions that have some input and then produce some output. Okay, so everything in Java being object-oriented programming language, to write even the simplest program, you actually have to create a class. Okay, so we are going to start by creating a class. Since we are going to write our first program and want to type hello world, so let's call this class hello world. So you can call it whatever you want. And so here's how you do this in Java. You do public class, and convention in Java is to give classes capitalized names. So let's call it hello world, and you open the curly brace and close the curly brace. I will get back to that soon. So here you give a name that you like to your class, and then let's save this file as our first Java program, and I will then explain these 3 words. Well, actually these 2 words, this is just a name that I picked. So here's the first caveat with Java. When you save this file, so I want to save it here in lecture 1 from Python to Java transition. So the important thing is that the file name has to be exactly the same as the name of the class. So the name of the class is hello world. So here we are going to call this file hello world. It has to be like that, otherwise you won't be able to compile. And then you add .java extension. Okay, so we save that. And here we have the beginning of the program that we want. And as you can see now that we actually saved this file with .java extension, the Sublime Text Editor, which is the plain text editor, it recognizes that this is supposed to be a Java program, and it does a nice coloring for you. For example, it uses this color to tell you that these are the keywords of Java language. So what does public mean here? It means that this class is accessible to anybody. Anybody can use it. They can create instances of this class. They can use methods or functions in this class, and so on. In Java, unlike Python, remember in Python, we were calling the functions that you just call by the name, that you don't need an object to call it, we call them functions. And the functions that needed an object to be used. What would be one example? For example, when we create a string s and then we did s dot, the one that we call the dot operator, we call the methods. In Java, they all call methods. Okay, I would probably, because I'm transitioning through as well from Python to Java, I will probably be switching between the 2, but when I say method or a function, hopefully you will know what I mean. Okay, so public means that anybody can use this class. In Python, everything was public, so that keyword was not there. Word class is the same as Python, and here's the name of the class. Okay, and again, it has to be the same as the name of the file in which you stored your program. Okay, so the next thing is that it's not enough. In order to have a program that runs, you need some way, something runnable inside of that program, inside of that class. So it's not enough just to define the classes. It was the same in Python. You need actually to either create an instance of a class and so on. So the way these type of classes that you can run and something happens, in Java, they're called runnable classes. And if you want your class to be runnable, the way to do this in Python is to create a special method called main. And this is an entry point in your program. So when you run your program, it finds the main method and starts running the commands that are inside of the main method or main function, if you like. Right, so here's how you do this. So here we created basically an empty main method, made function. Let's go through these words to understand, so we can understand what they are. And we are getting closer to completing our first program. Public, again, it means that anybody can use this method. Okay. Let's look at this word here, void. So this is the name of the method. It's called main. It's a special method. You have to call it that. And again, this is an entering point in your program. This is the first function that is run in the class. So this is the name of the function. So let's look at these words here. These are so-called, this one here and this one here, these are so-called modifiers, these special keywords. So this one again is self-explanatory. It means that this function anybody can run. Let's look at this word here. Unlike Python, in Java, every function, as well as variables, you have to declare a type. For the functions, okay, before you give a function name, before the function, you have to tell, you have to specify what is the return type. Remember, in Python, we were writing this type contract, and we were specifying what is the return type of a function. In Java, you have to declare that return type, and void, the word void is used for functions that don't return anything. So that would be equivalent to what we were doing in Python when we wrote none. Some functions that would, let's say, just print and don't return anything. So the function main does not return a new value, so therefore you use the keyword void to specify this. Input parameter to this function, this two square brackets indicates, so the name of the variable input parameter is args, and this thing here declares that is a list of strings. The square brackets here indicate that's a list. In Java, the lists are called arrays. And finally, we have this word static here. Static stands for the functions. It's basically like the functions that we were writing in the first half or first 2/3 of the class in Python, of the semester in Python. These are the functions that you just call by name. In other words, these are the functions that don't need an instance of a class. They don't need an object in order to be called. Okay, so in Java, you indicate that by putting this keyword, this so-called modifier, static. Okay, so these are the functions that you can just call by the function name. So now that we went through this, we are finally ready to complete this program and write our first Hello World program in Java. So here's how you do that. In Python, there is a class called system. Inside of that class, there is a static variable called out that refers to something called the print stream, where you displayed the print results. And the static variable you can call a method or a function called println, meaning print line, and n stands for new. And then you give it as input a string that you want printed. And in our case, we want hello world. Okay, so there you go. Here's our first Java program. And every time you write a statement in Java program, of this one here, you're telling Java to print this. You have to end the statement. Unlike in Python, you have to end the statement with a semicolon. This is one of the, when you transition from Python to Java, this is one of the very common mistakes. I'm sure in this video I will do it many times. So hopefully I don't have mistakes here. So this is a print statement, and this is how you call a print function in Java. So this program here is equivalent to Python's program, which was, here's how we do comments in Java, which was print hello world. So this thing here, Java, is equivalent to Python program. That was this. Okay, so let's see how we can run this program. First of all, make sure you save the program. You can save it. I know a key combination. It's useful to learn the key combination because it's something that you will be doing often. So after you save the file, you start a terminal. I'm already there inside of the folder or directory. You see the program that we just created. Okay, so here comes another difference between Python and Java. In order to run, so this hello world program, this is a simple text. It's something that human can read. So the first thing you have to do if you're going to run a Java program, you have to compile it using a Java compiler. So let's do that. Here's how you do it. You run a command called javac, which stands, I guess, for Java compiler. C stands for a compiler. And then you give it the name of the program that you want compiled. Okay, so if I didn't have any mistakes, and hopefully I didn't, there will be mistakes displayed here, and surely during this lecture you're going to see many, including those from missed semicolons. So now if you see what we have in this directory, you will see that, that this process, compiling this file, created a new file called hello-world.class. Okay, so while Hello World Java is a humanly readable text file, this Hello World class, this is so-called bytecode, is something that you can think of it as being a machine-readable program. It's actually it's somewhere in between. It's really not a machine code. It's something called bytecode that Java Virtual Machine can translate and run for you. Let me see if one can look at that. You can say it's binary. Okay. No. All right. So here's how. So let's see again. So here's how you run a Java program. So we are basically done with this file. Every time you want to run a Java program, actually, this will be enough for you, unless you made some changes and then you have to compile it again. Okay, so we will see that part too. All right, so here's how you run the program, and there's a little caveat here again. So now you use the word Java. So this basically you're calling Java Virtual Machine. And so you use word Java. Notice it doesn't have a C anymore. We want to run this program. And the next thing is that you don't actually put this file name. You don't use .class. You just use the first half, the one before the dot, if you want to run this program. So this is how you run the program in the terminal. And as you can see here, it worked. Okay, so let's add a few more lines and then analyze a bit again the differences at this very beginning between Python and Java. So we can add another line. I'm copy pasting because it's already too long to type. We can add something like goodbye world. Then we can add another line saying this is really the end. Okay, so I saved that file. So let's see if it's still working. And now if I run this, okay, it didn't change. Why did it not change? Well, we changed the file. We have to recompile. We have to compile again. Okay, it's still running the old compiled version. So we run this compiler again to compile our program. And now if we type hello world, okay, so it's going to print. All of these 3 lines. All right, so let's demonstrate actually. Let me show you a first mistake that you may encounter in, which is that actually the name of your class is not the same as the name of the file in which you saved it. Let's add here a few extra D's and try to compile. Right, and here you get your first class. It's actually quite readable. It says that Hello World Java. The class Hello World with lots of these is public and therefore it should be declared in the file named this. So it's telling you that the name of the class and the name of the file should be the same. Okay, so let's compare that to how you would do this in Python. So here's this Java program is equivalent to this Python here. Program on the left. So things to notice, here I erase this. So here this, as I mentioned, this Sublime Text is kind of for sale, but you get an unlimited license or license to use it without paying for unlimited time. So if you just cancel it, you can continue, or you can find another editor. It really doesn't matter which editor you're using. Use the one that you find easiest and most helpful for what you're trying to do. Okay, so where was I? We were looking at the difference between this Java program and this Python program. One of the things to notice is that at the end of each statement you have to put a semicolon. In Python it was enough to hit a new line. Another difference is that a block of code, so here you can see here a block of code in Java, it's delimited, so you put around the block of code, you put curly braces. This is how you indicate the beginning and end of the block in Java. You still indent the code. The way you do that in Python is by indenting the code correctly. In Java, you still do it, although it's not necessary. The reason you do it because otherwise it becomes completely unreadable. So this code here is part of the main function. So you indent it in. You could move it to the right. You could do something like this. The program is still the same, but this is very unreadable. So you shouldn't do it. You should still indent the code correctly, although it doesn't really have a function, important function, the way it does in Python. Okay, so let's go and continue with our program and look at other differences between Java and Python. By the way, you can run the same Java. You can run without recompiling. You can run it as many times as you want the program. It's only that when you make some changes that you should recompile. So we have seen so far quite a few differences already between Java and Python. One of them is that Java is compiled. You need to compile it first. Actually, Java and Python is an interpreted language. It interprets and runs line by line. Java is actually a little bit in between because you compile it and then actually something called Java Virtual Machine is interpreting the bytecode. It's converting the bytecode into the machine code that is actually being run on your hardware. And that makes it a little bit, if you like, slower and a little bit different from C and C++, which when you compile, you actually end up with the machine code. Okay, so that is difference one, actually quite a few already we've seen here. The next important difference that if you ask somebody what a difference between Java and Python, probably the first one that they will tell you is that Java is statically typed language, unlike Python. So we're going to see what that means. If you recall the way to create a variable, so let me make this a little bit slower, a little bit smaller. The way to create a variable in Python, you could do something like x is equal 1,000,000, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and that basically means the variable x at this moment is referring to an integer, which is 1,000,000. But in next line, you can do something and say x is now a string today. Okay, so this was not a problem in Python, and basically the way to create a variable in Python, as we can see, was to initialize the variable as we have done here. This is not the case in Java. For each variable that you want to use, you need to declare its type. And once you declare its type, you basically cannot change it. If you declare a variable to be one that basically holds an integer, then that variables can only hold an integer. If you try to assign it a string, you're going to get a compilation error. Okay, so let's see what are the Java types. By the way, before we even get there, let me mention how you do comments in Java. Remember, in Python it was this hash sign, and here's how you do this in Java. So this is so use these two slashes if you want just a comment, which is a one line. This is a one-line comment, and this editor nicely changes the color into gray, telling you that the compiler will ignore this because it's just a comment. If you want your comment to span more than one line, then you use this. Sorry. All right. So in between here, this is you can write something like this. This is a multi-line comment. Okay, so because I want to show you different data types you have in Python, I'm going to actually be writing them here. So we have a record of what we were covering so far. So here are data types or Java types. Okay, Java has something called Python had basically one type. I'm going to get to that, and I'm going to tell you which one of Java types is equivalent to the type that you have in Python. So here are the Java types. They're so-called, there's a type that's called a byte. Okay, so this is a data type that is used to just a byte of data. It's used to represent integers that you can represent with 8 bits. So if you have 8 bits, you can basically represent 2 to the 8 values, so which is 256 different values. In particular, if you declare a variable to be of type byte, you can represent numbers from -128 all the way to +127. Okay, so let's try to see that, how one would do this. Okay, so for example, if you like create a variable, let's say a variable is called x, and you declare it to be a byte. As you can see again, this editor is quite happy. When you do B already, it's offering, this is a keyword in Java. You're telling Java that variable x will be of type byte. Okay, you can declare it like this and assign it, initialize its value in the next line, or you can do it all in the same line. So for example, we can say that this is -50, and then we can print that variable to see that this actually works. And then we're going to see what happens actually if you give it some value that is outside of that range. So we try to print x and don't forget a semicolon. So let's try to compile that. Java C, hello world. Okay, it looks like I didn't make any mistakes, and if we run this program, you see that it prints, there's no problem. But here, for example, it says that these values go from -128 to 127, and if we give it some value of -129, so let's see now what happens. You basically, there you go, you get a compilation error. It's telling you incompatible type possible lossy conversion from int to a byte. So you have a value that is outside of this range, but you told Java that x should be of type byte, but you gave it a value that is actually outside of the range. Okay, and then you get a compilation error. So the next one, Java type, if you want, is a short. If you want a little bit bigger integers, is a short. That's the one you can represent with 16 bits. So that one has about, you can use it to represent about 2 to the 16 values. So this is 65536 different values. You don't need to remember these things. But it's approximately goes from -32,000 to 32,000 something. Okay, so this is the range of numbers that you can use with short. So if we declared actually this variable x to be short, now we wouldn't have problems anymore. Okay, so when we compile it, it wouldn't be a problem, and if we run that code, it would print 129. The next value is an int. That's probably the one that you heard about, even if you didn't program in Java before. That one uses 32 bits. So it can represent about 2 to the 32 values. So about 4 billion different values, from -2 billion roughly to about +2 billion. Okay, so if we declare x to be int, and we give it a value 1 million, like we did in that Python code, 123, 123. So now it would be equal to this, well, except for the string part. And okay, so we wouldn't have a problem. If I did this before with the short, we would be in trouble, because the value short take go between -32,000 to about 32,000. Okay, so the next data type, if that is not big enough for you, so I can give you an example of something where you may run into trouble even if you started with values that are reasonable size. If you have another variable which is x is equal to another million, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, so here's a million. And let's say now we want to create a new variable z, which is x times y. By the way, spacing is not important in Java. You can use any spacing you like. So, well, quite similar to Python. So now when we try to do this, all right, so we actually will not have any problem compiling. Everything looks fine so far. However, when we run a program, we're going to get a so-called runtime error, because million times million is more than what can fit in an integer here. It's outside of the range. Oh, except that I didn't do what I wanted. I wanted to do z here. Let's see if that is now working. Okay, so it didn't crash. Actually, it doesn't crash, but you get this strange value here. So we get a million times million, so we should get something which is 1 followed by 6 by 12 zeros. Okay, so 1 followed by 12 zeros is much more than the range here, which is 2 billion. Okay, so it's much bigger number than this here. So what happens is that basically once you hit 2 billion, that value gets wrapped around. In fact, in this case, gets wrapped around a couple of times. It's almost like taking a mod operator, and you end up with this strange result here. So it's very important to be aware of this, because you may not necessarily get a crash. Okay, so if you want to have something, so if you want to have even bigger values, then you and remember, this was not a problem in Python. We could you could do million times million without any problems. In fact, we could do much bigger numbers, right? Okay, so where were we? Instead, you can use long, right, which is 62 bits, and you get lots more different values, which is you get 2 to the 62 different values. But again, even that one you can still break. So unlike Python, where basically integers are represented exactly no matter how big they are, in Python, at least in these data types, there is a limit to the size of an integer that you can create. So you can create a very big integers, but it's still not exact. Okay, so here we wouldn't have a problem if we put a long. If we put a long instead of an int, and we put a long here. Well, we didn't have to change all of these. We could have only changed z, and then when we print z, we wouldn't have this strange result anymore. I'm in Python here. Let's compile it again and run it, and we get here the correct value: 1 followed by 12, 1 followed by 12 zeros. Okay, so next thing that we have, so these are the data types, the so-called primitive data types that present integers. Then you have a float. These are the 32-bit numbers. It doesn't really matter. That doesn't really matter. They are used to represent real numbers, and as such, they are approximation of real numbers. We have seen that the same was true in Python. We have seen that one has to be careful with real numbers, with floats in programming languages, because they are always approximation of real numbers. And we have even seen this strange result where 0.3 minus 0.1 gives you something which is not 0.2, you get 0.1999999. So the same is the case in Python. So this is used to, so these are like real numbers, or basically like by like, I mean approximations of real numbers. So therefore, you need to be careful, as they are not exact. Okay. And if you want a higher precision, you can use a double, which are 62 bits. You are still 2 bits. They're just higher precision. They are still approximations of real numbers, but just the mistakes is going to appear, I don't know, in 10th decimal place rather than in 5th, and so on. Then you have Boolean type, which is basically 1 bit. kind of, because everything, the smallest piece of data is a byte actually, but it's a one bit of data. It's used to represent true or false values in Python. Notice the true and false are also in Java, they are not capitalized. Okay, so there's a Boolean type. And finally, oh, not finally, there's another type called char that is used to, it's a 16-bit, it uses 16 bits, and it's used to represent a single Unicode characters. Okay, so this is something that may be useful for you, or will be useful for you if you choose to redo assignment number 3. You are it's possible in Java also has Unicode characters. So basically this data type is used to represent exactly one character. Okay, and finally there is a data type called reference. It is a reference to an object, and basically this is a variable or data type that stores an address to an object. And in fact, in Python, all of the variables were such variable. All the variables in Python are reference variable, because remember, in Python, every data type, everything that you create, it's actually an object, and what is stored in the variables are addresses of such object. This is not the case in Java. These data types are so-called primitive types. Okay. All right. So the next thing, I'm going to show you a few other examples of some differences between. Okay, so what we have seen so far are primitive Java's data types. So basically these are all keywords: byte, short, int, long, float, double, boolean, and char, that you use to declare that you can use to declare the variables, as well as return types of the functions. This, by the way, it's not a keyword. This is just describing a type of a variable that we will see shortly. The one that stores the address of an object. Okay, so we have seen these primitive data types so far from Python. What about the arithmetic operations? They're basically the same. Everything is the same as in Python, except that you don't have exponentiation. There's no exponentiation. If you want exponentiation, you can call Python power method from a math class. I'm going to show you that in a moment. So let's play with this just briefly. So here we declare 3 variables that are long, so integers that are long, so x, y, and z. We can see that we can multiply them. We can also change the values inside of this variable. We can something like x is 3, y is 2. Let's not forget the semicolon. Let's not forget a semicolon. Something to be careful of is that if you do, let me demonstrate. So if you do x divided by y in this situation here in Python, so this would be equivalent to doing something like this in Python. So let's look at that code. So in Python, remember the division. The results of division is always a real number, even if the 2 operands are integers. So let's see what happens if you do that in Python, in Java. Okay, so you see actually that the result of this operation is 1 rather than 1.5. So we are asking Java to print 3 divided by 2 in case when both operands are integers. In this case, they both are. Remember, long are integers. In that case, if both operands are integer, Java does integer division. So this is something to be wary of. So if you actually don't want integer division, so one way we can do this is 3.0. We can do this 3.0 here. Well, because I actually, I can demonstrate that, but let me show you now this, that if one of the operands is a real, then Java does the higher precision operation. In this case, actually doesn't do integer division. So let's see that. Unlike in Python, however, you cannot go here and change this to 3. It will not compile. It's going to tell you where the mistake is, and the error, start reading these errors, incompatible types, possible lossy conversion due to a long. So you told Python that x should be an integer, a long integer, and actually you're trying to assign it a float, a real value. So this is not allowed. Okay, so you could instead do something like what we've done here, declare the variable q is a double and assign it a double value, and then in this case we would have a double, like a real number divided by division, then the result of that operation would be a double number. So we wouldn't have a loss of precision, it wouldn't be integer division. So let's see that. We compile and we run the program, and now we see it prints 1.5 because we have the q is 3.0 divided by 2, that's 1.5. So again, in Java, if you divide two integers, the result is an integer, and the operation performs an integer division. And if you have a mixed expression where two operands are mixed types, then the one with a higher precision will win, and you're going to have a non-integer division. It's one of them is a real and the other one is integer. So again, that's unlike Python, where no matter what the operands are, the result of division is a real number, is a float, if you like. Okay, so the next thing, by the way, also the similar to Python, you can cast between the types. For example, you can say that we can define a new variable that is a float t, and we have seen here that x is a long. We can also an integer. We can cast it to a float. The syntax is like this. In Python, you open parentheses and put a float there, and then put a variable that you want to cast. So this will cast x, and the result of this operation will be basically million point zero. So if we print t, oh, wrong print operation. This should print million point zero. I erased this, the variable that we are casting. Oh, sorry, x is 3 here. X is not million anymore. Okay, so it cast it into 3.0. So here's another example of casting. We can say that p is an int, for example. The result of division of 4.0 and 2 is 2.0, but we can cast it, the result of that operation, into int. And then if we print p, we will see that it won't be 2.0, that it will be, let's not forget the semicolons, that it will be 2. Very cool. So much about this primitive data type. Here on the side, I will also provide you with equivalent code in Python. So this is how you cast in Python variable x into a float. And here's the syntax in Python and so forth. Oh, by the way, as I already mentioned, so the operations are pretty much all the same, the arithmetic operation, except there's no exponentiation, and the rules are left to right, or if there is the same precedence, and otherwise the BEDMAS rules apply, like in Python or like in math, basically. So if you want a power operation, so this is how we have done it. For example, in Python, you can say that 2 to the x is, then you can use this power operator. Or you could have called the power function from the math module in Python. So the way to do this in Java is again to use methods from math class or math library. So basically, I Google math Java, it takes you to Oracle's webpage with all information about that class, and you're going to see that there's many functions there, and one of them is power function. it is somewhere here, but I can show you, for example, how to call it. So the equivalent of this statement, in Python would be system.out.println. What we want to say is the 2 to the 10, for example, is equal, and then we concatenate the results of, this is a string, like in Python, and then we concatenate the result of this call math. So there's a power method in the math class, so you first tell Java where it is. It's in math class, and then you give it two arguments, 2 and 10. First is a base, and then its exponent. There are two things to notice here. This is a string, and the result of this operation should be an int or a double. Unlike Python, Java allows you to concatenate, to mix the types. When you do concatenation, basically, as long as one of the two operands is a string, it's going to convert the result of this operation to a string and then do concatenation. Okay, remember in Python you had to explicitly convert other types into string if you wanted to perform concatenation. Since in Python both operands had to be a string to apply concatenation. Okay, and another thing to notice is that in Java we didn't have to, in Python we had to import math to use that, and in Java we don't have to import. Some of the classes are basically imported by default. That includes the math class. Some of them you have to import specifically. We're going to see this very soon when we get to how do you get input from the user, from the keyboard, if you like. Okay, so let's see if this is working now. Right, so it tells that the 2 to the 10 is 1024. Actually, as you can see, the result of that function returns a float or a double. Sorry, a float or a double. It doesn't return an integer. Okay, so it was cast to a string, and we get the result of that operation. Something else you may want to do that it's in that math class is converting a double into an turning a value into, or converting a value into an absolute value. So we can call this method in a similar way. For example, we can do println. What can I do? Forget the string. Let's do just math.abs. That's the name of the function. We want an absolute value of -22, and then let's not forget the semicolon. So now at the end, it should print 22. Remember that in Python, no, that's very important, but in Python, this is the equivalent. Actually, absolute value is inbuilt, and it's not even in math class. You didn't have to put the math before calling this function. All right. So we've seen primitive data types in Python. We've seen arithmetic operations, but last is Boolean operators like comparison, and an or. So Boolean operators are basically the same. So especially the comparison operators. So comparison operators, you have equal, you have greater than equal, then what else do we have? Less than equal. Remember, and this is how you do not equal in Java. You can do the same in Python. And what else? Am I missing something? And what is actually different is the Boolean operators and an or and a not. So and is like this, or is like two vertical lines. So don't mix this with two capital I's. So it's two vertical lines, and not is exclamation mark. So let's see this. You see here that there is a type for a Boolean variable. So let's see example of that. What do I have here? We can define variable a to be a Boolean variable, and then we can assign it some Boolean value, which is a true or false. For example, here we have the x is 3 and y is 2. We can ask, is x not equal to y, the result of this operation should be true, so a should be true. So let's see, system.out.println a, so this should print true. There you go. We can change the value of a. We can say, actually, I want a to be the result of operation false, or false. The result of false is false. And so now if we print it again, it should print false for the second time. Second time around, it should print false. Except that there you go. I forgot a semicolon here. There you go. So now it prints false. Okay, so that's so much about the primitive data types in Python. We have seen how to run our first Python program and what kind of primitive variables you can create and assign values to in Python. So the next thing that we have seen in Python class, and actually one of the, often when you ask people what are the differences between Python and Java, they're actually going to mention lists. Lists are called arrays in Java, and indeed they are quite different. But actually Java has the lists in Python are dynamic, and in some ways they appear much more powerful than Java's arrays, and that's because basically Python's lists are the same as some objects of type array list in Java. So, but here is how you create lists or create arrays in Java. Okay, so first of all, even that you have to declare a type, and here's how you declare that some variable is actually taking you to an object of type array. Okay, so you can, let's say, array of, or list of, I'm going to be using array, I'm going to try to use array, but when I use array, think of it as something similar to Python's lists. So this is how you declare that this variable a is going to be an array or take you to an object of type array. And to create, let's say we want to create array with, let's say, 6 elements, 6 integers. We're declaring that this is an array of integers, and you use the keyword new, and you use this syntax, int, you open square brackets, and you put the size of the array that you want. Let's say I'm going to hard code it, says I want an array with 6 integers. So in this case, what Java does is going to create, actually I can put it in the same way. We use Python Visualizer to see what's going on. I'm going to show you in a minute or a couple of minutes the same thing with Java. It's quite helpful to understand what is going on. So this creates an array of 6 integers, and in fact it assigns the default values for an int which is a 0. So unlike, I'm going to get to that. And the elements of this array, they have to be integers. So you cannot, so that you can do a of 3 is equal to 100. We are allowed to do that. Arrays are mutable in Java the same way they are in Python. However, you cannot do something like this. You cannot assign, you cannot mix the type. You cannot say the 4th element in this array is actually a string today. That's not, you would get a compilation error. Let's see another difference. Remember in Python, so let's look at this, how you do. So this is the equivalent of what you see in the Boolean operators. So here's a quick way. So basically this line here creates an array, as I mentioned, of 6 integers, all of them being zeros. Here's a quick way to do that. Remember that shortcut, there are many ways to do this in Python, but this is one of the shortcuts we've seen to create an array with 6 zeros. And remember that Python is kind of very user-friendly, and if you did print a, it actually is not going to print an address of this list. It will print the elements of the list. It's going to do the user-friendly thing. This is not the case in Python. So if you do system.out.println a, it's going to print the address of this array. So basically this variable array is one of these types. Okay, it's a reference variable. What's stored in A is an address of this array. Okay, of the array that we created here on the right hand side. Forgot the semicolon again. All right, so let's see that this is indeed the case. By the way, remember in Python, if you wanted to know what is the length of an array, let's say you want to print it, you use this function called len of a. The way to do it is in Java, is system.out.println. A.length gives you the length of the array. So this should print 6, and we're going to see what this prints. Hopefully I didn't make some mistakes. Okay, so there we go. We're looking at the last two things that are printed here. As you can see, this doesn't print. So unlike Python, which would print 6 zeros here, Python would print this. I hope you remember. Basically, it would print this. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And actually, Java prints something that is akin to the address. It basically prints what's in a way stored in this variable, in this reference variable, which is an address of this array. Okay, and the last thing it prints is 6 because a.length. So a is the name of the, if you like, is the name of this array, and a.length gives you the length of that. Gives you the length of that array. Okay, so we have seen here, let me try to move this as it may be. Okay, so here's, we've seen how to create an array. So it's actually the right hand side using this keyword new. With this, we're creating an array of 6 integers, basically 6 zeros. This actually can be a two-step process. You can do something like this. Here you're declaring that a is a reference variable that is referring to an array of integers, and then you do something like this. On the right-hand side, you create an array that you want. Unlike, there's another thing that's different from Python. Once you create an array, you cannot change this size. Okay, so this array here that we just created, we can never change the size. There's no such thing as doing the dot append that we had in Python that allows you to change, to add an element, a 7th element to the end of this list, for example. Okay, so let's create another array. Here's another way to do it. So this is one way to do it. You just give it a size. I mean, typically here you would have some, you're working with something and you have some variable n, and which is an integer, and then you would say create an array with n elements, and this is how you would create it. If you want your array to be an array of characters, then here you would declare this to be a char, so each element would be a single character. If you want an array of floats, you would declare it like this here, and like this here, and so on. Okay, so here's another way to, this is like a shortcut way to create and populate an array in Java. You can say I want L to be a reference variable, reference to an array. Then you open curly braces, so not square braces like in Python, and then you assign it some elements. Let's say 1, 4, 6, 3, 2, 7. So these two would create an array with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements. These being the elements of that array. So first element or elements in index 0 is 1, element in index 1 is 4, and so forth. And I'm going to show you how to print these, but let's try to compile this to show you that, oh, n is not defined. We had 6 here. Okay, so this shortcut work, by the way, there's a little caveat in. If you want to use this shortcut to populate an array in Java, you cannot do this two-step process. This will not compile. Okay, so here you can separate it if you use this new, but this you cannot do. This will give you a mistake. So it has to be a one-liner if you want to use the shortcut, where you immediately populate populate the array. Okay, so let's say the first thing we want to do is print, because we've seen here that this thing here doesn't print elements of the list of the array. So let's say we want to print elements of this array L. For that you need a loop. We were doing this in Python as well, and we wanted to have a custom way to print the elements of the list. So let's say we want to print the elements of this array. For that we've used a loop. So the same thing that we had in Python, you can loop over the elements of the array, or you can loop over the indices of the array. So let's recall how we did this. So this is how, let me move this here. Actually, I don't need to move it there, it's right here. So this line of code, here is equivalent to this line of code in Java. And here this was looping over the elements of the list, and then we printed the elements one by one. So we can do the same in Java using a for loop over the elements of this array, and the syntax is kind of similar. So you open parentheses, you do for, and then you open parentheses here. Then remember this, when we were talking in Python about how you create a variable, the first way is to initialize, is basically you initialize a variable to some value that creates a variable in Python. A second way is actually to put it in the for loop. So this creates a variable called item. And remember, in Python, for each variable, in Java, for each variable, you have to declare its type. So this basically will be taking elements of this list. In our case, we want item to be taking elements from this list from this array of integers. So we have to declare that this item is going to be a variable that is of type int, and then you use colon, and then you give a name of the array. And in Python, to indicate that the block is starting, you use a colon. In Python, you use the curly braces, and then you indent properly well, you don't need to indent again, but you definitely should. It's a good practice. And you use Java's print command to print the elements of items. So this is basically the syntax for looping over the elements of the array. So this item will take elements of this array one by one. First time you come to the loop, item will be 1. Next time you come to the loop, item will be 4, and so forth. And then we print the elements of that array. So let's see if that is working. Okay, and then we run it. There you go. So it was here, this is from previous line when we print the length of that array A, and then we start here, and as you can see, we are printing elements of that array one by one, 1, 4, 6, 3, 2, 7. Okay, so let's say now I change my mind. I actually want this list L to have all the zeros. So we want to loop through the elements of this array and change all of these elements to 0. So like Python, elements of the arrays are mutable. So this would be, for example, a way to change the first element of that array to 0. But if you want to change all of them, we are going to need a loop. And in particular, we are going to loop over the indices of this array. We have seen, so this is how you do it in Python. Okay, so this variable I takes values from 0 to the size of this list -1, which is exactly what we want, and then we assign each element of that list to 0. So we want the same thing here. So here's the syntax for that for loop. So basically, once you see this, you see the two main syntaxes for loops in Java. This is so-called 3-part for loop. The syntax comes all the way from C and before. So once you know this one, and you will be using it quite often, most likely throughout your career if you end up programming. So this is how you use this 3-way for loop, if you like. So the way you do it is, so let's look at that. The way you do it is you need to open parentheses. And inside of it, it will have three parts. First of all, you tell, so again, here in Python, this creates variable I. In Java, you have to say that I is an integer. You have to declare a type. And then you initialize that variable to the first value that you want. So that is part one of the for loop. Then you use a colon. So this is telling Java that I is starting at 0, okay, because the first value I will take 0. Then you tell Java that you want to go all the way up to L dot length. Okay, so the last value I should take is L dot the length of that array minus 1, because that gives you the last index of this array. And that's the second part. And finally, you want to increment this I starting at 0. And every time you enter the loop, you want to increment that I by 1. And there's a nice shortcut that is missing in Python, and which is that if you do I++, so here again, notice that we separated these three parts by semicolon. And the third part is I++. This increments I by 1. And then you have a block of code where that will be repeated this many times. Okay, so in this case is 6 times. Okay, so here we have a block of code, and what we want to do in this particular case is set all the values of this array to 0. So L of, the name of that array is L of I, so the body is the same, except that you need a semicolon each time you write a statement. Okay, so first time you enter the loop, the value of I is 0. When you come to the end of the loop, this is incremented, so next time you come in the loop. Okay, so here's a piece of the code, again, that three-part for loop in Java. That loops over the indices of an array, and in this case all we want to do is set the elements of that array to 0. Initially they were not 0, and that was equivalent to this piece of code in Python. Okay, so let's see if we were successful. So before the change, this is when we printed this list, those were the elements, and after the change, these are the elements. So let's compile that. Okay, there is a spelling error. This is length. There's an H here. Okay, so now if we run this program, we see here these were the original elements of the array, and now we successfully set them to 0. Okay, so here's another small difference between Python and Java. So we have now these two arrays, array A that has 6 zeros, and now we have array L that has 6 zeros. And in Python, here's the equivalent code, A and L. This is what we've done here. And remember in Python, if we did this, is A equal to L? That's what it is asking. Does the user-friendly answer? It doesn't compare the content of these two variables, which are addresses of two different lists. It actually compares the elements of the two lists, and since the elements are the same, this would print true in Python. So let's see the same in Java. So if you want to know is A equal L, let's see what that does. Let me compile it and run it. It's going to say false, because what's stored in A is an address of this array, and what's stored in L is the address of a different array. They just so happen to have the same elements, and in that case Java just compared the content of the two variables. Again, the same was true. A and L in Python contain the addresses of two different lists, but this operator equal in Python compares the elements of the list rather than content of these two variables. Okay, so much about this quick recap of arrays. Again, this L and A, they are reference variable. They behave exactly the same as what we have seen in Python. So when you are doing memory tracing, you use arrows for those variables. One last thing, there are two things that I want to show you before I conclude this first lecture in transition between Java and Python. And what we're missing is strings of the basic things, is strings. and how do you get input from the user. So strings are objects in Python. The convention is to use capital letters. So the data type, again, you have to declare a variable. So if you want to create a string, this is how we, let's say, created a string in Python, and that's how we printed its sixth character. In this case, I guess it was I. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it would be I. So let's do the same in Java. So you would declare that variable s refers to a string, and then the rest is the same. So let me copy paste exactly the same code. Strings are also immutable in Java the way they're immutable in Python. So this, we created a string. Again, you can do it in two parts. Actually, in this case, you can do something like this. You can say that s is a reference variable. Again, s is a reference variable taking you to this object of type string. Okay, so then we can print it if you like to see that this indeed. By the way, of course, if you wanted to print here, we've done that. Okay, so here, if you wanted to compare these two arrays, the elements of these two arrays, you can code it yourself by simply making a for loop and comparing the elements of the two arrays inside of the for loop. Semicolon is missing. By the way, in Python, in Java, there are no, unlike Python, there are no single quote strings, and there are no multi-line strings. Okay, so let's see this now. Right, so it prints this is my string. Also, here's another difference. Let's try to print the sixth character of this string. System.out.println. So in Python, we could index the strings. You could do something like this. That's not possible in Java. However, there are many methods inside of a string class. One of them is to give you exactly an element at some position. So let's look at that. So here's documentation from Java string class. What I did here is I just Googled string class Java. It takes you to Java's documentation about string class, and then you can look at the methods that are available there. So for example, actually the first one tells you return, there's a method called char@. You give it an index, which is an integer, and then it returns a character value at that specified index. So that's what we want to use. There's something important to notice here. This one doesn't say, if you look at the type of the method or function, you see here that this method is not static. If you don't see a word static here, that means it's one of those methods that you have to have an object instance of the class created. You have to have an object, and it's an object, if you like, that calls that method. This is unlike that math. So these are unlike those functions that methods that we just call by a method name, by a function name, like this was the case. Like we have seen that. Let me first show you the code, how you would use it, and then I'm going to compare the two, so you can see the importance of this meaning of this word static versus static not being here. Okay, so where is that program? So if we actually wanted this, here's how you do it. So s is a string that we just created, and then this is an object of type string. S takes you, it's a reference variable that takes you to an object of type string, and then you do s and use a dot operator, and then you make a call to this char@. Method char@, and we said we want 6. So and then you're given an argument which is the index that you want. So here's that method call. So you call it by a dot operator. These are so-called instance methods of Java, the equivalent to methods in Python. And here, let's look at that. So these are the one that object calls with a dot operator, and let's look at that math call that we had. For example, power function and ABS function, we didn't need an object, we just called them by the name. We had to tell them that it's a math library, math class, but we just call those functions, those methods by a method name. Okay, so in Python we call these functions and we called these methods. And in Java you will differentiate them because in the function definition, if the header of the functions, these functions are created by using the word static, like we have seen with the main already, and these functions are created by omitting that word static, means these are so-called instance methods. So let's look at that here again. So you see this ABS, absolute value function. It's a static function, one of those that you call just by the name, or static method. And this one, the word static is omitted, so it's actually an instant method. It's an object that calls those methods. By the way, in Java, they don't really say call a method, they say invoke a method. So call, function call, and method invocation, these are the same things. Okay, so let's see if this is now working. So the last thing that should be printed here is letter I, letter S. Oh yes, one S. Oh yes, of course, because indexing starts at 0. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So at index 6, we have a letter S. Okay, so much about strings. There are many methods, like in Python. There are many methods available to you for from the string class. Okay, so let's go back and see the last piece that was missing from basically the first 2/3 of the class that we did in ITI 1120. That is, how do you get input from the user. So let's say we want to do something equivalent to this in Python. Let's ignore this for a little bit. Okay, so let's see, we want to do okay, something related to this. We ask user input something, and remember in Python we would just call an input function. It returns a string. That string is stored as 2, and when then we can tell user you inputted, and then we print that string. So let's do the same in Java. It's a little bit more complicated in Java. First of all, for that we need a special type of object that is in the class called scanner. And for that, we have to actually import that class. So unlike math class, but which is somehow by default imported without you specifically imported it, the scanner class, if you want to do input on a terminal, you have to import that class. So here I'm going to do it at the beginning, anywhere before the public cloud. I'm going to import, the word is was it the same here? Import is the same keyword as in Python. And then we import the class called scanner. Here's the full name of the class is java.utility.scanner. And again, you need a semicolon. So we imported that class. Now we can create an object of that class. Okay, so you have seen here, for example, if we wanted to, that S refers to object type string, we use the name of the class, which is string, and then we give our name of the variable. You do the same for other objects. Okay, so we want to create an object of type scanner. It doesn't really matter what that class does. So scanner, and then you give a variable name. You're saying, let's say SC is a let's say SC is let's say SC is a variable called of type scanner, and then we create an object again using new. Remember that we did the same thing here with that's the keyword. When we create an array, we say we want to create a new object of type scanner, and in particular we want system.in. Okay, so this is a command that you are going to type in, where here you choose your own variable name if you want to capture the user input. Okay, and then you do this only once. Okay, so think of it as creating something that captures an input object. SC captures input from the user. And then the rest, we are basically, let's say, converting this first to Java. So we print a message saying input something. So here's Java's print function. We say input something. Okay, that's how you do it. And here's how you, let's say you want, here's a line that is equivalent basically to this input. So basically this input function returns a string. So here in Python you are entering some text, and when you press enter then it returns a string. Okay, so if you want exactly the same in Java, first of all you use this variable name, and then you call a method called next line. Okay, so this method is equivalent to this. So it's going to wait for you to enter some text, and then when you hit enter, it's going to return a string. So we can store that in a variable, let's say s2, because we use s already here. Okay, so this will capture the text that the user enters until they press enter, and then it's going to return a string, and then variable s2 is going to refer to that string. And then we do something like this, except that we use of course Java's print command. We can say you inputted, and then we put quotes, and we concatenate string s2, and then we can another quote, because we want to quote whoever is inputting this. So let's see if this is working. Input something. Well, let's say I want to input hello world again. I don't know why that. And it says you inputted this. Okay. So this, if you want it, so the syntax again is a little bit different. You need an object of type scanner and a variable taken into that object, and then it is this is an instant method that object itself called. This method is the one that is equivalent to Python's input, but if you want, there's many methods in this class. For example, if you want to enter an integer, if you're expecting an integer, then you would do something like int, I don't know what letter, I didn't use anymore, wsc.next int. This actually would let you, it would return actually an integer. So remember, in Python it was always returning a string, so we were casting in an integer. Here we have different methods that you can use. If you want integer, you just ask for integer. Here you use a method that captures an integer. It's going to return an integer. Let's say input an integer. So actually let me put this back here. Okay. And here we ask for integer, and then we print it. So notice that there's no casting. So let's see if we succeeded with this. Input something, that was when we were just asking for the text. Today is Saturday. That's my first text, and then we get printed, and then input an integer. I print 111, and then that gets printed back. Okay, so there are many of these functions in the scanner, methods in the scanner class. I had prepared it somewhere here. You can see this is if you want to capture a byte from the keyboard, you do this, short, int, long, float, double. This reads a string until you create a white space, then it's going to immediately return without hitting enter, and this is the one that we have seen. Okay, so that's it for the first part of for the lecture 1 on the transition between Java and Python. So that's it.